So a lot of us, we tend to have a wrong image of God, right? And there's a parable about the parable of the talents where Jesus Christ comes and gives 3 different talents to 3 different people, right? So to the first one, he gave 5 talents. And the second one, he gave 2 talents. And the third servant, he gave only 1 talent. We're going to pick up the story in the book of Matthew chapter 25. And we're going to look at what the person with 1 talent said to when Jesus Christ came to him. And he said, "Then he who had received the 1 talent came and said, 'Lord, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed.'" See, already this servant has a perception of who God is, to be a hard man. And God is unfair, right? A lot of us, we have this wrong image of God, like he's just a judgmental, like he just do this, do that, like command, like he's unfair, like he doesn't know what I'm going through in my life. And we have this wrong image of who God is. And look what he says in next verse. And he said, "And I was afraid and went and hid your talent to the ground. Look, there where you have what is yours." And we must ask ourselves, is this me? Do I have a wrong image of who God is? The problem with this servant, he's only looking at God as an unfair, like a hard man. But there's a lack of the love of God, the grace of God, and the kindness of God. He's half true. Yeah, God could be, he is a fair man, right? But if our image of God is like this servant, our relationship with him will never grow. And that's what we looked at last week, and that's why we say God is accepted. We looked at how God is present. He's a relational. He wants to have a relationship with us. And we ended the class saying it's not enough just to know about God, right? Now that we knew about him last week, we looked at the 3 different attributes, and I'm not saying those are, all 3, and you could have classes forever learning about who God is, but there's a lot about that we can know about God, but it's not enough just to know about God. But to truly get to know him and experience him in all parts of our life, in our career, school, with our friends, with our non-church friends, when we're at a restaurant. God or Christ isn't something we just do on Sundays, here at church, around church people. But what do we do right after we get out of church? I'm reading this book, I don't know if you guys have read it, but it's Introduction to God. And it's by Andrew Dam. Again, this is what he says from the book. "We cannot really convey the truth of who God is by talking about him. We have to get to know him directly. We have to get to know him directly. So that's what we're going to spend today on. Last week was to kind of like, okay, who is God, right? And we kind of said a few things yet last week, but today we're going to talk about how do I get to know him directly. There's a difference between knowing about somebody and knowing that person. I'll give you guys an example. I grew up as a Kobe Bryant fan. So we just celebrated, 3 years from, when he passed away. And that was my favorite player growing up. I know a lot about him. I knew that he was drafted in 1996. That's when I came to America. And some of you guys weren't even born then, which is kind of crazy. But 96, if he was drafted, he was the 13th pick, 5 times NBA champion. He won 2 Finals MVP, 1 MVP. And I could say, Steve Nash stole a couple MVPs from him. And I keep going. Number 8, number 24, one of the greatest scorers that we've ever seen, right? We all know about the Mamba mentality, his nickname. I know a lot about him. But there's no relationship there. He doesn't even know that I exist. That's the difference between about knowing about somebody and knowing somebody. I know a lot about Kobe, but he doesn't even know I exist. There's no relationship. We've never talked. We've never spent alone time. I don't know him like his wife, Vanessa, knew him. They had an intimate relationship that his close friends knew him because of the time that he spent with them. So how do you build a relationship with someone? How do you build a relationship with someone? You spend time with them. You spend time with them. Any of your relationship, any of your close friends, you spend time with that person. My wife, we spend a lot of time together, and that's why we're married. It's because of the time that we spent together, getting to know each other, that got us to marriage. Any of your best friends, like people you consider like your close friends, you know a lot about them because of the amount of time that you spend with them. In a relationship, back in the day, we used to actually talk on the phone, and you'd be in a relationship, and it's like, you hang up. No, you hang up first. You used to do that game, right? For those of you guys, I know it's we live in a generation of like texting, we text a lot more, but back then we used to actually have conversation, right? So you talk to people a lot. Having a personal relationship with God is no different. It's about spending time with God. It's about spending time with God. And it's an ongoing process. It's not something that it's not a one-time thing. It's an ongoing process. Any of your relationship, right? It's an ongoing process, not something that you do once. And we're going to talk about the 2 C's. We talk about consistency and commitment. Can everybody say that? Consistency and commitment. So the first one, we're going to talk about consistency of alone time. When I say alone time, this is something that we, like nowadays in 2023, that we just can't do. Like, feel like we can't do anything by ourselves. There's a philosopher by the name of Blaise Pascal, and this is what he says about alone time. All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. One of our biggest problems isn't going to church. Churches are packed. Look at the youth group. Look how many people are here. It's not about coming to YLTC class. It's not about Bible study. It's not about attending church or attending Mahalit or Sa'atat and all those stuff. We do all those stuff. But it's our inability to sit in a room alone with God. Me and God, and that's it. Not tweeting about it, not putting it on Instagram, no distraction. There's a beautiful story, and most of you guys probably know the story of Martha and Mary. And I think we could take a lesson from that story. From the Gospel of Luke chapter 10. So Jesus Christ is going into their house, right? To Martha and Mary's house. And this is what happens. Now it happened as they went that he entered, talking about Jesus Christ, to a certain village. And a certain woman named Martha welcomed him into her house. And she had a sister called Mary, who also sat at Jesus' feet and heard his word. Thank you. Sorry. So, there goes Mary. What's Mary doing? Sitting at where? The feet of Jesus, right? She sees Jesus. She didn't care about anything else. She goes and sits at the feet of Jesus. But look what Martha does. But Martha was distracted with much serving, and she approached him and said, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Therefore, tell her to help me. This is a warning, and this speaks to me a lot. This is a warning to all servants, especially if you're in YLTC or St. Paul or a deacon of a church. A lot of time, we're so used to serving, doing everything. We forget, we neglect the importance of sitting at the feet of Jesus. Just me and Jesus alone. We're busy, we're distracted. And look how our Lord, our Savior, Jesus Christ, look how he answers Martha. And Jesus answered and said to her, Martha, Martha, you're worried and troubled about many things, but one thing is needed, and Mary has chosen that good part, which will not be taken away from her. That's Mary sitting at the feet of Jesus. Martha, too distracted, serving. A lot of times I ask myself, and I get caught up. I'm busy. Oh, I got to do this. I got to do that. Sometimes, like, I should be sitting here and listening to it. So when I'm giving this sermon, it's like speaking to myself as well. A lot of us are like Martha. We're too busy. We're too distracted. We have no time. We replace our YLTC service with our alone time. Nowadays, with our phones, very distracted. A lot of us could go to church, can't sit without checking our phone. Like sometimes we were so habit of like, it doesn't even buzz. Like we just take it out, look at it, open it, close it back up. Like it's just a habit that we've created. We live in a world that's just about like doing so many things at once, even driving. There are times where I would drive from like work to home and I have no idea what happened, how I got there, but I got there. Because I'm so distracted with doing so many things while I'm on my way home. Funny that hopefully you guys ate your lunch before here, but think about it, like, there are times where, like, I know you guys could probably relate, like, you go to the bathroom to use the bathroom and be like, oh, I forgot my phone, let me grab my phone. How many of you guys have done that before? It's like, we can't even use the bathroom without our phones. Our problem isn't going to church. Our problem isn't going to like YCC classes. The biggest problem that we have is our inability to sit alone with God. Going back to the types of relationship. My wife and I were married 5 years. There's a lot of times we go on double dates. We go to, out with Kasi Sapai and Blaine. We do that a lot. We went out with Dawit and Gigi. We went out with Mr. Baraka back there and his friend. I even went out on dates a couple weeks ago. With Nati and Seal. That was our double date, and they paid for our dinner, so thank you guys. And you could ask them why they were on dates, but we'll leave that to. But all this to say, like, it's okay to do group things in group. It's okay that we have this. It's okay to do Bible study, like in groups. But your relationship with God will only go as far as that you have that one-on-one time. Just my wife and I, as much as we love to go on double dates, as much as like we love to go out and do things with other people in a group setting, we need our alone time. If not, our marriage will suffer. There are times where we say, like, you know what, we'll sit down and say, we need to do this, we need to go on dates. We're busy, we have a child, we have St. Paul, we have this, that, like family obligation, social events. But we say, we need time alone. Our relationship with God is no different. Regardless of how busy your life is, whether you're in school, whether you're in career, whether you're a servant, whether you're a deacon, whatever it is, don't neglect your alone time with God. Don't neglect your alone time with God. A lot of times people say, like, how do I know what God wants me to do? Like, what is God's will for me? Or how do I hear God's voice? I have a daughter, she's 2, right? And a lot of times, she talks a lot. She says a lot of things, but for those of you guys that might not spend time with her, it's hard to understand her. But I could really translate what she's saying. And Lydia, our nanny, our babysitter, she's with our daughter most of the time. She understands what she's saying. Why? Because of the time that she spends with her. That's the relationship with God. You want to hear his voice? You want to know what he wants for you? Like what his will is? Spend time with him. Spend time with him. I think about the creation of Adam and Eve, right? When God created Adam, he created Adam first. There was a relationship aspect there. He could have created Adam and Eve together, but he created Adam by himself alone. And I say, why? Like, he's God. He could have created both of them, men and women, at the same time. Let them have it. But I think it's to teach us that the relationship with God is the foundation for any other relationship. Our relationship with God is the foundation of our relationship with anybody else. God desires alone time. Moses, when he was called to Mount Sinai, it was Moses that got called to go to the mountain. God didn't want everybody. He said, Moses, you come, and I'll talk to you. I have something to tell you. I have something to give you. And that's God to each and every one of us. He has something to tell you. He has something to give you. But he wants you alone. He wants that alone time with you. Jesus Christ, who is our role model, right? As busy as he was, the healing people, preaching, teaching, miracles, doing all these things. Let's see what he did. We'll read this story from Matthew chapter 14, but that book from Matthew chapter 14, this is right after he fed the 5,000 people. So here he is, doing miracles, doing things, but look what he does right after that moment. And after Jesus had dismissed the crowds, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. Even Jesus, as busy as he was, serving other people, he just served 5,000 people. But he said, I need to be with my Father alone. I need to go pray alone, by myself. One of the greatest sermons our Lord, our Savior Jesus Christ gave, the Sermon on the Mount. It's about like 3 chapters, but it's a one-day sermon. He talked about how to fast. He talked about how to give, forgiving others. But he also taught about the importance of alone time. And he told us how to pray. Matthew chapter 6, verse 6. When you pray, go into your room, and when you have shut your door, pray to your Father who is in secret place. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you openly. Here he was talking about, like, talking to the people of the church. He said, don't be like them. Talking about the Pharisees. The Pharisees, they like to be in public. They like to be seen. To be honest, a lot of times, I think that's the issue with us. We like to do public things. We like to be seen with our Netherline, like teaching and doing Mezmer and all that stuff, but there's no alone time with God. And that's where our relationship with God suffers a lot, because of that alone time. Group setting, we should do that. I agree. This Bible study, keep coming. I'm not saying don't come next week, all right? But don't neglect the alone time. This doesn't replace our alone time with God. If Jesus, as busy as he was, made being alone time with his Father as important, we ought to follow his example. Don't neglect alone time. So I'll say these you ought to have done without leaving the others undone. Bible study is great. Going to liturgy is great. Mahalit, Sata, all the stuff that people do is great. But don't neglect your alone time with God. So what does alone time look like? What do I mean by alone time? I want to clarify a few things. Alone time isn't me driving to work. That's not alone time. There's a lot of distraction there. You're driving. You should be constant. That's not alone time. Like my wife and I, we talk a lot through text message. There's phone calls. There's group text message. There's different means of us talking. But that doesn't replace me and her having alone time sitting with each other. Saint Cyprian of Carthage is an early Christian church writer, and this is what he says about alone time. He said, be consistently committed to prayer and reading. By praying, you speak to God, and reading, God speaks to you. So that alone time, when you sit alone, there's somebody talking, there's somebody listening. When I pray, I'm talking to God. When I read his word, I'm listening to what he's telling me. So that's our goal. Consistent, the first C. Consistent time with God. Alone time with no distraction. But that's our goal, right? I think we'll be doing disservice. We just say that's a good goal. But what is our system? What is our system? We all have the same goal. We want to read our Bible more. We want to grow spiritually. We want to lose weight. We want to be successful. Everybody has the same goal. When people get married, they don't say, I'll be married for 5 years. That's not their goal. Their goal is eternal. But people, they have a system of what works. I love sports. Every NFL team, right? What is their goal? To win a championship. Except the Redskins. I'll say, let's not use them as an example. But every team goes into the season to win a championship. Nobody ever said, I'll settle for last place. I'll settle for whatever. But there's a system. NBA teams, like any sports, everybody has the same goal. But it's about the system that you put that gets you the results. So what are some practical examples that we could say? So we're going to go through 3 different things. First one, have a plan. Develop a plan. Your alone time. It's good that we said alone time is important. Hopefully you understand the importance of having alone time. Develop a plan. What is your plan? I have this thing in my office that if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. We all have a wish list. If your goal is just a goal, it's a wish list without a plan. So, what are you going to read? What are you going to read? Don't just say, okay, I'm going to do alone time and just go in a room with nothing, no plan. That's just not something that's going to work. It's a system that's not going to work. What are you going to read? And don't say the Bible. The people that say, I'm going to read the Bible, it's like saying, I'm going to the library, and what are you going to read? I'm going to read the entire library. The Bible is a collection of books, right? So think about a book that you want to read with your alone time. I'll give a recommendation. Start with epistles. If you're not used to reading, and I think we have a QR code in the notes where it gives you different guidance of what books to read, the version of there's different versions of the Bible that you can read. So have a plan. What book are you going to read? Next one. How much are you going to read? Are you going to read a chapter a day? 5 chapters a day? But have a plan, have a system that works for you. And are you going to journal? Are you going to write? And I'm a big pusher, like it's something that I need to start doing. This is something I used to do back then. I used to journal, I used to write. Think about going to an important meeting at work. When you go meet your boss or you go to work, like an important meeting, you have like something to take notes. Like you just don't show up with nothing, right? Same thing, when you're alone time with God, take something to write on. He has something to tell you. Whatever that is, journal. Like whether you do it on paper, whether you do it on computer, whatever it is, have something to write down what you learned, what you read. The second one, set a time. Are you a morning person? Right? Are you a night person? All I would say is give God your best. Give God your best. Don't say when I have time. If I have time at the end of the day, I'll pray. I'll have an alone time with God. If God is important, somebody that you want to have a relationship with, set a time. Don't miss that appointment. If you think about it, and I'll say the morning is the best time because you're about to start the day. We have no idea what we need. And even in our Father's Prayer, we say, give us our daily bread. What is it that you need? So you need to ask God, give me my daily, I don't know what I'm going to face today. I'm going into the world, I have no idea what I'm going to face. Give me what I need. Is it kindness? Is it generosity? Is it patience? Whatever that is, give me my daily bread. So I would recommend a morning. But if morning doesn't work for you, figure out what works for you. Set a time. Afternoon, but set that appointment and don't miss it. Don't miss it. Finally, determine the length. This one is hard. Is it 10 minutes? Is it 20 minutes? 30 minutes? 60 minutes? We're all on a different journey. We're all on a different journey. Whatever that is, you know what you can, but give God your best. Maybe you've never done alone time with God. 10 minutes might be such a long time. Start 5. But for those that have already been doing this, maybe you've got 30 minutes, increase that time. Increase that time. And what I would say is, if you're just starting this plan, this system, be realistic. Maybe you can't do this 7 times a week, right? Maybe start out with 4. Maybe start out with 4. And again, this doesn't replace like our morning and our nighttime prayer, right? Like those are things. But alone time is truly like a 10, 15, 30, whatever time that you have. It's an appointment with God. So, the first one is consistent what? Consistent alone time. Everybody say that with me. Consistent? All right. So you thought the first one was hard? We'll look at the second one. What was the second word? There was consistent. What was the second one? The second C? Commitment. Somebody said it. Commitment. Commitment to obedience. Parents, I see a good amount of parents today. We get this. Me as a parent, obedient, like I love that. When I tell my daughter, eat, and she eats, happy. When I tell her to sleep, and she sleeps, we're happy. But it's frustrating when they don't. And when I tell my daughter what to eat, when to sleep, don't run, it's not for my benefit. It's for her benefit, right? My parents, I grew up in a house and there's 4 of us. 3 brothers and we had my little sister. But we grew up in, again, we all came in 96. So growing up, like, there was a lot of rules. It was strict. Like, I couldn't go out partying. I couldn't go sleep over whoever, different people's house. Like, I can't be like, oh, I'm sleeping here, or I'm going to this party, or I'm going here. Grades, like, they would know when the grades, and they want to see our grades. And if you're messing up, like something is being taken away. At that time, I thought it was too strict. Like, why? Like, why? Now that I'm older, I thank God my parents loved me enough, that they cared enough to do these things. Because I see a lot of my friends that had, quote unquote, like freedom, they're not in the greatest place. I know people that are going in and out of jail because of how their life turned out. These are people that I knew growing up in high school. My parents cared who my friends were. My parents, it's not to their benefit. There's nothing that they want in return. God is no different. God is no different. He wants us to obey his commandment. Not for his sake, but for our sake. Not for his sake. Like, there is nothing that, we don't do anything for him. Like, me following his commandments, it's not for him. He doesn't need our praise. He doesn't need our alone time. He doesn't need us to obey any of his commandments, but it's for us. If you think about it, a traffic light. What happens when you see a red light? Can you go? You can if you want. Like, everybody's like, no, you can't go. You can, right? If you see a red, you can. But what would happen? A lot of bad things could happen. Your life can be taken away. Somebody else's life can be taken away. So me stopping at their red light, it benefits me staying safe. And that's how we have to look at his commandments. Being obedient to him is not for the sake of making him happy. It's for us. It's for me. It's for you. So that's why I say obedience is an act of love. Being obedient is how God showed us his love. St. Paul tells us in the book of Philippians, chapter 2, verse 8, and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death, even the death of the cross. For God so loved the world that he gave us his only begotten Son, and he was obedient to the point of death. Obedience is an act of love. So that's how Christ showed us his love. So what do? We all say we love God, we love Christ. And this is what he tells us. If you love me, keep my commandments. Simple. Be obedient. You say you love me. Be obedient. That's what it means to be a Christian. And I want to clarify, when I say obedient, it doesn't mean that you're going to be perfect. We're not perfect. And we'll talk about the church sacraments in week 4 a little bit. But I'm not saying you have to be perfect. But think about it. David, King David, we all know his shortfalls. But he was called a man after my own heart. That's who Christ refers to as to King David. A man after my own heart. Peter, who denied Christ 3 times. He fell. He wasn't always obedient. But that's who Christ said, I'm going to build my church on this rock. Talking about Peter. But some of us, we simply ignore his commandments. We refuse to obey, to be obedient, because we think, it's not a big deal. Everybody does it. Cursing. I know people that just say, it's not a big deal. Like, what's the matter? When you say, love your enemies, we question that. Do I have to? Do you know what he did to me? Do you know what she did to me? No sex before marriage. A lot of us be like, it's 2023. Everybody does it. Tithing, given to the church. We're called to give. We'll talk a little bit about that in week 4. But we simply ignore it. There's a difference between falling to sin and repenting, wanting to follow the commandment, versus just completely ignoring his commandments. There's a book that I'm reading. It's called I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. And there's an example that I saw where it talks about an atheist, and it questions, what's the difference between an atheist that doesn't believe versus a Christian who reads and ignores what he reads? What's the difference between an atheist that doesn't believe versus us Christians? We read and we say, doesn't apply to me. So ask yourself, what are you not being obedient in? What is God telling you to be obedient in that we're just ignoring? Because I don't like this one. Obedience is an act of love. Just as Christ said, if you love me, keep my commandments. There's a beautiful analogy in the book of Luke where Christ talks about the Pharisees. And I love this story, and I think it goes along with being obedient. He said, but why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do the things which I say? Meaning, you call me Lord, Lord, but you don't do what I tell you to do. You're not obedient. And he said, whoever comes to me and hears my saying and does them, I will show you whom he is like. He's like a man building a house who dug deep and laid the foundation on the rock. And when the flood arose, the stream beat vehemently against the house and could not shake it, for it was found on the rock. That's who we want to be. A man that built his house on a foundation, being obedient. When there's flood, when things happen, our life, our goal is looking at God. Can't be shaken. But look at the life of obedience, where we when we don't follow his commandments. But he who heard and did nothing is like a man who built a house on the earth without foundation, against which the stream beat vehemently, and immediately he fell. And the ruins of the house was great. Disobedient. When problems come, we crumble. Our life falls apart. Why? Because our foundation is not built on doing the things that God has asked us to do. So ask yourself, which one are we? The man that built his house on the rock, the foundation, or the house without the foundation? I'll tell you, like, the most important thing that you can do when building a house is the foundation. Your kitchen might look nice, everything else might look nice. But if your foundation is messed up, it's a matter of time before the house falls apart. And that applies to our spiritual life. What is our foundation built on? Is it what the world tells us? Or is it us following the commandments of God? We started saying that building a relationship with God takes two things: commitment and consistency. That consistency is our alone time with God. Our commitment is to a life of obedience. And as I conclude here, Pope, this is a very good quote that a friend sent me. Pope Shenouda says it this way: your relationship with the Holy Bible is centered around possessing the Bible, companionship of the Bible, reading the Bible, understanding the Bible, contemplating it, studying it, memorizing it. That's your alone time with God. Not just reading it and say, I read my Bible, but truly spending time. What is God telling me? How is he speaking to me? That's your alone time. And above all, living it and training yourself and observing and obeying its commandments. Not enough just to know the Bible. Not enough just to recite verses. But we must live based on what the Bible and his commandments. One of the scariest verse for me, and I always have a struggle time with this, it's just a scary verse. It comes from the Gospel of Matthew. And it reads, many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in your name, cast out demons in your name, and done many wonders in your name? And then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness. For all the servants, for all the deacons, people in the church, we will say, we've done all these things. We come to church, we do this, we do that, we study, Bible study, discussion leaders. Like, I do all this stuff. We've done all these things, God. Said, I never knew you. To me, that verse scares me. So I hope and pray that we will take it serious about the importance of spending alone time with God. Regardless of how involved we are in our church, regardless of if we're serving in the church, whether in deacon or teachers or whatever it is, that doesn't neglect our alone time with God. Just as we did last week, we have homework for us for this week as well. So we have a homework and a challenge. This week's homework is develop a system that works for you. Develop a system that works for you, meaning that alone time, being consistent. Is it 3 days? Is it 4 days? If you've never done alone time, maybe start out with 2 days a week. See what happens. But just like in anything, your spiritual life, same way, that it should grow. The more you lift, the more you exercise, you should run faster, you should lift heavier. Same thing with our spiritual life. And the second one is take a vacation with God. Take a vacation with God. A lot of time we like to do things in a group, which is fine. I'm not knocking, group, doing things in a group. I think that's great. But sometimes, just like alone time, like Satan and I, we go on group vacation, we've done that. But there are times where my wife and I just need to go somewhere alone. Whether that's a weekend, whether it's a week, whatever it is. So again, take a vacation with God. There's a beautiful monastery that's about an hour away. You don't always have to go with a group. You can go by yourself. Don't tell anybody. Don't tweet about it. Don't put it on Instagram. Just go by yourself. And watch how your relationship with God grows. Wasalamat lang, Ziagan.